Started to ask him if he was okay, and he would answer in a tone that sounded as if his tongue was swollen. And I kept asking him, what's going on? And he said, I have a tooth infection. And he would walk around holding the side of his face. This went on for quite some time. And I would go to the house and ask Tim, can I take you to the doctor? Nope. You really ought to let me take you to the doctor. Nope, I'm good. It's just an infection, I'm going to the dentist. And he did. He went to 2 different dentists. He made appointments with 2, and again, there's no way to reason why he did that, but he had antibiotics stacked. Antibiotics, Advil, throat spray for a sore throat, and he insisted this was a throat infection. Well, first it was a tooth infection, and then we said, okay, well, he's seeking dental care, he's in good hands. Then it was, it's actually a throat infection. And that's why I can't speak. Okay, well now we need to get you to a doctor. Well, no, it's a tooth infection. We're going to go back to the dentist. The frustration was when I would call my mom's house and she'd say, he left 2 hours ago and I don't know where he is and he has to work this afternoon, and she would be in a panic. And so I started calling these dentist offices only to be told, we can't tell you anything. We can't tell you if he's even been here. And I argued with the one receptionist. I said, clearly there's something wrong with him. She goes, I can't discuss it with you. There was nothing I could do. Then Thanksgiving 2014 came, and we were having dinner at my brother Jimmy's house. Again, just as in years past, Timmy wasn't there, and that was not unusual. Grace was always said by my brother Jim, who always included Tim. Well, we thought Tim was home alone. And what we found out the next day was that Tim had taken himself to the hospital. I can't express the level of guilt that we felt sitting there, toasting our glasses, having this amazing meal, and here our brother was at the hospital, and we didn't know it was going to be for the fight of his life, quite literally. The next day he wouldn't tell anybody what happened. And the trust he had in my brother Steve, which was already almost non-existent, then was completely blown because he found Steve going through his mail. Steve was looking for any documents that came home from the hospital to see some glimpse of what was going on with him. All he found was a piece of paper saying that it was recommended Tim visit an ear, nose, and throat specialist. My mom asked him, did you make an appointment? He said yes, and he told her when. The doctor's office then called to verify the appointment, and they actually did speak to my mom. So we all sat on pins and needles waiting for this appointment to come and see what was going to happen next. And I called my mom frantically all day that day. Timmy never went. He never got out of bed. He just didn't bother. So we started having emails through the family, trying to arrange a meeting for us all to discuss what to do next. Timmy needed help, it was clear. And we were never going to forgive ourselves for looking the other way for all these years. And, how dare we claim to love this guy and not do anything for him. This meeting kept getting put off by snowstorms and, travel plans with my brother, who was a salesman. We finally came together after planning from November 2014, May 2015. We finally pulled our what together and arranged this meeting. My brother Steve, one of the oldest, had reported that Tim now had a huge lump on the side of his neck, and that he was walking almost in tippy-toe fashion, that he was clearly in an awful lot of pain. And about a week earlier, Tim had gone to my mom and very gently leaned over and whispered to her, I think I'd like to quit my job. And she said, oh, Tim, you can't do that. You have to keep your job for insurance, and you've been there for so long, I'm sure you have a pension plan, and so on and so forth, not understanding the agony Tim was in. And Tim nodded his head and he said, okay. And he walked away, and he never, ever missed a day of work in all the years he worked at this insurance company, including the pain he was in and the tumor on the side of his neck. He never missed a day. He was never late, never came home early. So he continued to go to work even after that conversation with my mom. So that day of our meeting, finding out that he had this growth on his neck and was walking around clearly in pain, Tim had worked until 11:30 the night before. we decided we were going to go to the house, and we were not going to take no for an answer. Timmy had to be seen, and that was that. And I went to the house, and my mom was absolutely furious because she was blindsided. We didn't tell her we were planning anything. I had made many phone calls to crisis intervention. My ex-sister-in-law worked very closely with NAMI, which many of you probably know is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and she suggested calling crisis intervention, which I did. Sadly, they were unable to help because Tim didn't threaten his life. He didn't threaten anybody else's life. They didn't see it as a crisis. My mom became unhinged. She was very, very angry with me that I had initiated this. She said, "You were one of 2 people left in this world Timmy trusts, and now you're going to ruin it." And I said, "Mom," I said, he's in pain. He needs medical treatment." And she said, "Yeah, he's going to be cured. Come back and have nobody." I said, "That's not true. He's going to come back and he's going to have us." And I said, "Imagine the guilt you're going to feel if something happens to him and you knew you could have done something and you didn't." So we whisked her away to another family member's home so that she wouldn't have to be there and watch, because she was in her 80s and certainly didn't need that. And I went out back to the patio where Timmy was smoking a cigarette, something he never gave up. And I said, "Tim," I said, "listen, it's clear you're in pain. There's something really wrong with you." I said, "Can you please come to the hospital with me?" And he shook his head no. And I'm not one to usually take no very easily. But I walked back out to the front porch where my brothers were, and I said, "Okay," I said, we have a problem. He's not going to comply, and I don't know what else to do." And finally, I said, "You know what? I'm just not going to give up. I'm going to follow him around and nag the daylights out of him, and he is going to the hospital today if it kills me." So I go back inside the house. Timmy had gone back upstairs to his bedroom. And I went up with the train of brothers behind me and my son. I opened the door and I said, "Tim," I said, "we are all out here, and we love you more than anything in the world. You're clearly suffering. There's no reason for it. Please let me take you to the hospital. I will be your voice. I will speak for you. No one will do anything to you without having it run past me first, and we will get you out of pain." And the shock when he lifted his head and he said, "Okay." And we were in hurry up mode. We got to do this right now before he changes his mind. And Tim was never a fast mover. And I went down and I waited on the porch and on the phone with everybody reporting that Tim was finally going to go to the hospital and get treatment for whatever this was. And he came down and disappeared. We thought maybe he snuck out the back and took off on us. And here he was out there having one last cigarette because he knew he wasn't going to be able to have one for a while once he got to the hospital. Priorities, So we get in the car to go to the hospital, and he looked me in the eye, and in his garbled voice he said, "You handle this." And I put my hand on his and I said, "You better believe I'll handle this." And I said, "The doctors are going to want to ask questions, and they're going to be difficult questions to answer." And I said, "If you would like me to handle this, you're probably going to have to sign some papers giving me permission to do that." And he said, "Yes, whatever we have to do." I said, "Okay." So we got to the hospital, where Tim was told in the emergency room that, "Oh, it's just a really bad infection," which never went away in his head. He held on to that for dear life. So we went out, called my mom. "Oh, thank God, it's just an infection. He's gonna have surgery tonight. They're gonna remove it. He's gonna be great. He'll be home in a few days." And my mom, I could hear the rosary beads clicking over the phone. She was so grateful that this had come to this conclusion, so to speak. I walked around behind Timmy telling all these doctors and nurses, he has paranoid schizophrenia and he's never ever going to admit it to any of you. So just so you know, if he starts to elaborate and tell you things that make no sense, you need to know that. I also said he drinks quite a bit of alcohol and there's a risk that he may start going into DTs and should be watched. So they took that seriously and started to watch for that. Out of nowhere, Dr. Yen shows up. I don't know if anybody knows who Dr. Yen is. He's a wonderful, wonderful man who I can't say enough about. He showed up and very matter-of-factly came into the room, and just to kind of backtrack a second to tell you Timmy's seriousness in having me handle this. My brother John and I were in the room with him. The nurse came in, handed John paperwork, and Timmy goes, "No, give it to her." He could barely talk at this point. And John was like, "Oh, okay, we'll let her have it." Dr. Yen walked in, and we were all so relieved, and everybody was getting ready to go home. Tim was going to have this surgery, and he was going to be great. Dr. Yen comes in, stands over Timmy, looks at us and says, "Okay, what we have here, it looks like a very advanced squamous cell carcinoma of the larynx." And my knees went weak, because this was not an infection, and why we had been told that, I'm not sure, but he said it's very advanced. He said this cancer has been there for quite some time, probably about 2 years. And he said the sad thing is it probably could have been treated 2 years ago, and he said, but it's pretty advanced at this point. And he said, we're going to keep Tim, and we're going to do some testing. We want to try to get a biopsy to find out just how far this is. We were dumbfounded. My brother Dennis went out in the parking lot, and when I went to find him, he was in a corner throwing up, because he and Timmy were very close as kids. All of us. It felt as though we had been punched in the chest. I told my brothers, please don't tell Mom. Let her have one night of peace. Let her go to bed thinking that he's going to be all right, and we'll deal with it in the morning. And my brother Steve, who lived with her, said, I can't carry out that kind of an act. She's going to be there when I get home, and I can't. He was clearly crying, and he said, I'm not going to be able to pull this off. So the brothers band together, and they all went together. They said, you stay here with Tim, we'll go. And they went to my mom's house, and I can only imagine what went through her head to see all her kids come walking through the front door. She thought they were coming to tell her that he had died. So they ruined her world that night by telling her that he had this cancer that was very serious, and that clearly he had had it for a long time. As the days went on, it was decided that this cancer had spread. It was all throughout Tim's body, and he was being given less than a 5% chance with treatment. They had also discussed treating his psychosis at the hospital, and I told my brothers, I said, that would just be cruel. You bring him back from this psychosis, remembering how he behaved the last time, and to tell him he's going to die? We're not doing that, and we all agreed that we were not going to do that. And the next morning, Timmy signed over power of attorney to me, and I took that very seriously, which of course anybody would, and I lost many, many nights' sleep over that. Every morning, the first thing Tim would do was ask the nurse, where's Mary Kate, which is what my family calls me. I would show up as early as possible. I would stay as late as possible. Every time the doctor came in and so much as asked Tim, how do you feel, he would look at me. How do I feel? You answer this question. I said, well, you can answer questions like that. And he was a great patient, and he listened. He wanted a cigarette, clearly, and they put a patch on to kind of placate him. We had doctors coming in, wanted to pull all his teeth to prepare him for radiation. And I got in arguments that I wasn't prepared for, saying, why are you going to pull all his teeth out? He already is dying, and now you're going to, and they said, well, in order for radiation. And I kept saying, no, we're not doing any of that. And then Timmy pulled me aside, and he was right, because he couldn't speak. He was writing. He's like, I want to do whatever is necessary. I want to fight. I'm going to beat this. Okay. That's what we'll do. We're going to fight. So Tim came home, and we made a plan of action, and Dr. Baxter was involved with his pain management treatment. We had doctor's appointments with radiation, with chemo, with the ear, nose, and throat doctor. We had PET scans scheduled. We had x-rays scheduled. All being done, mind you, with no insurance. Timmy worked at an insurance company, and all he had was dental insurance because he thought he had a toothache. So after going through all this, he kept pumping his fist saying, fight, fight, fight. And I said, okay, whatever you want, we'll do it. Until the one doctor's appointment where he sat just a few minutes too long, and he was pointing at his watch, looking at me like, we've been here way too long. And I fell apart. I just started to cry, because this was an impossible situation to navigate with him. He wanted to fight, but then he wanted to go home, and what I was thinking is, how am I going to get him to comply? I mean, you can't start radiation and then decide, I'm going to take a couple days off, and then it doesn't work that way. And I tried to explain that to him. I said, Tim, every day is going to be more of this. Every day is going to be, you go, you get radiation. You're going to go upstairs, you're going to get chemo. You're going to go over here, you're going to have blood work. You're going to probably have to have all your teeth pulled. And this is going to be just about every day. So if you're impatient at this one doctor's appointment, and Tim looked past me the whole time, and he's going like this, pumping his fist. I was beyond frustrated. I didn't know what to do, and of course, you know, my family was behind all the decisions. He thought I was making them, but we were all making them. I taught Timmy how to use email, and I woke up one Sunday morning preparing for my boyfriend's daughter to graduate from high school, and I saw an email from Timmy saying, I think they're all wrong at the hospital. I don't have cancer. I have an infection, and if you can get me an antibiotic and Neosporin, that's all I need. Now, mind you, in the hospital, this cyst on his neck had ruptured, so he literally had a hole now on the side of his neck that was not going to heal because it was cancerous. So I sat down and disheartened thought, okay, well, let's start making some decisions. So I picked up the phone that Sunday morning and I called Dr. Baxter. I only met him one time, and I just needed a voice of reason. And I don't know how long you spent on the phone with me, but you were an angel that day. And by the way, the letter he received, he's being way too modest. I was thanking him for literally saving me that day. I had no idea what to do. And what Dr. Baxter walked me through helped me make a decision that the whole family could stand behind. We decided that we were going to lie to Timmy. We were going to give him medication for pain, we were going to give him medication for anxiety, and we were going to tell him it was an antibiotic. And Dr. Baxter called in a prescription for Ativan, and I was not able to go get it, but I told my brother John, I said, go get that prescription and make sure you take every label and throw it away, hide every piece of paperwork that comes with it. Tell him it's an antibiotic, tell him I said it's okay to take it. So at the graduation, I get a phone call from my brother John saying, Timmy doesn't believe me. He won't take it because there's no paper. He wants to see the paperwork. And he said even Mom tried to give it to him, and he very politely took it and he put it on a shelf and walked away and wouldn't take it. I said, put him on the phone. So Timmy gets on the phone. I said, hey Tim, I said, Dr. Baxter called in an antibiotic for you. And since it's Sunday, they couldn't put all the paperwork together. So that is an antibiotic. I told John to give that to you, so please go ahead and take it. Hung up the phone, I got a text message a minute later saying Tim took the pill. So he was going to start to kind of settle down now. So for that I was grateful, but the difficult thing was the next morning, Monday morning, when the hospice nurse came and I told her, you have to lie to him. She said, I don't appreciate having to lie to somebody. I said, we're talking about somebody who's mentally ill. He already doesn't trust you because he doesn't know you. You're going to try to administer medication, and he's going to want to know what you're giving him, and if you tell him it's anything other than an antibiotic, he's not going to take it. She said, I just don't appreciate having to lie to him. I said, well then don't, give it to me. I'll give it to him, and you just don't have to say anything. And that's how that went. And I gave Timmy his medication from that point forward. I gave Timmy his medication, I gave him his feedings through his tube. I took him to his appointments, I sat with him because he didn't trust anyone else to do any of those things. It became a full-time job. It was stressful. I desperately needed help, and thank God I have a big family who stood behind me, but they were unable to communicate with him. Everything had to be done through the second party here. Timmy was diagnosed on May 17th. Throughout that 32 days that he survived after that, he had days where his breathing would stop. And I was certain that this was the day. And my mom is very involved in her church, and she called the priest and had him come and give Tim his last rites, and we all gathered together and said goodbye. And later that night I got a text from my brother Steve that Tim was down in the basement doing laundry. And so the next morning I went down there and found that he had holes in his coat and that his fingers were burned. he was going outside and smoking, and he was on so many painkillers that he would fall asleep, and he was burning himself and burning his clothes. So it was decided that someone had to be with him 24 hours a day, and so my brother John and I took turns. He worked the night shift, I worked the day shift, until it started to become evident that we were getting closer to the end. Then I just didn't go home at all anymore. And the last night, Timmy was bouncing off the walls. He was so restless, and we gave him Haldol. And I think that, I'm not sure who even prescribed that, but one of the hospice nurses brought it. And there was a fear that Haldol can be used for psychosis, as well as, the anxiety prior to somebody dying. And I didn't think we were terribly worried about that, because he was on enough morphine and everything else that, he had no idea. He was drinking from his shoe. He was smoking cigarettes that were not in his hand. He was hallucinating and clearly, was comfortable, which is what we wanted. I found myself in a position of, I'm not a very religious person. I'm spiritual but not religious, and I was pleading with God to please take him, please show him mercy. My anger that night was that, you allowed this man to suffer all these years with a severe mental illness where he trusted nobody in this world, and now he's suffering with cancer, like the final blow. And I was angry and disgusted, and my faith was definitely hanging in the balance that night. And what really tipped it was my mom. I told my mom to come in and tell Timmy it was okay to let go. This woman had buried her oldest son years earlier after an accident and never recovered from that. And now here she was telling her youngest son that it was okay for him to die. And I sat and I watched that, and never, to this day, I've never recovered from that. And my mom's never recovered from that. But it's what Timmy needed to hear, because she was the one person on this earth that I think he would have stayed forever for, to take care of her. And I think he held on for that reason. And when she said that, Tim started to kind of settle down. I walked over and I gathered Tim up in my arms, and I held his hand and stroked his beautiful gray hair. And I said, Tim, you can let go. You fought the good fight, and you fought harder than anybody. And you are a hero, and your voice is going to continue, I promise you that. And I said, in your dreamings, do you ever see Mark, my older brother who died, and Dad? And he shook his head, yes. And I said, well, I promised you I would be your voice, and I would answer questions for you, and I would take care of you. I said, and now it's your turn to keep your promise, to go with Mark and Dad and the angels and whoever's calling you. And he nodded his head, and he fought for a little while, and our dog Lucy, or Abby rather, started to howl in a very bizarre whisper. And I looked at Timmy and I said, let go. You don't have to fight anymore. And Tim stopped, and he let go. And Tim finally had peace, and we had peace. And as heartbroken as we were to lose Tim, it was a gift, because this world was not kind to Timmy. This life was not kind to Timmy. Timmy was tormented. He was picked on because of his mental illness. But to me, Tim was the sweetest soul. He was a sweet, kind, gentle soul. And I will never, ever stop telling his story. And I will go to the ends of the earth to tell his story if it means changing those laws that somebody could have called one of us and said, your brother is here with what looks to be a very serious illness, claiming to have a tooth infection. Anything. Call a mental health professional who could have come and intervened. But the laws, the HIPAA laws, literally protected him right to death. And what a shame that was. And they're protecting others right to death. There are so many people out there who are missing out on valuable treatment, like the treatment that Dr. Baxter offers, the treatments that you offer. And by the time they come into your hands, it's because they were protected beyond getting help, and they were beyond reason. Mentally, the capacity was not there to get the help they needed. And that's Tim's story, and I don't want to, I'm not a salesperson. I did write a book about Tim's story. It's poorly put together because I rushed it to have it ready for today, and it's being revamped, but anybody interested in hearing more about Tim's story, we will have the book upstairs. And I thank you all so much. I'm so grateful to be here today, and I'm so grateful that you all shared in Tim's story. Thank you.